Shalom and welcome to another edition of our Daily Bread. I'm Messianic Torah. This week's parashat is the second parashat of the book of Bamidbar, also called Numbers, and it's called Nasso, which means make an accounting. And in this week's parashat, it starts in Numbers, or Bamidbar 4:21 through 7:89, with the half Torah being in Judges, or Shoftim 13:2 through 25. And my message for 2014-15 is called The Faithful. And what I've done, instead of making one big long video, is I've broken it up into 5 smaller 5 to 10 minute videos. And so the first one was called The Counting of the Priests, the second one was The Defiled Sent Out, and this is the third one, which is called Trespass and Jealousy. And in this week's parasha, we get into the next little segment of laws, and these are the laws of the trespass and the laws of jealousy. And so what we see when we start digging into these is 2 interesting concepts, because I always try and look at kind of what the basics are being said and what's happening. So you can learn a lot from that. So for example, in Numbers 5:5, and it's really in 5:6 when we get the laws of the trespass, it says, "Speak unto the children of Israel, when a man or a woman shall commit any sin that men commit, to do a trespass against Yodewaheh, and that person be guilty." So now we have a trespass, okay? And we think about what a trespass is, and it's kind of going somewhere you're not supposed to. You know, it's not respecting the boundary, right? When we think of trespassing, there's boundaries and you pass them. The Torah are boundaries, right? It says, "Thou shalt not steal," and you've gone past that boundary, right? It was a limitation on you, and it was a set thing, and that boundary creates 2 spaces. Okay? A boundary creates a space outside, and it creates a space inside. So like even a property boundary, right? If you have a property and there's a boundary around it, then that shows you that everything inside is your property, and also everything outside of that is actually not your property. So those divisions create 2 different spaces when we have a boundary. And a trespass is to go. Could be someone from outside going in where they're not supposed to. Could be you're on your property and you've trespassed outside of your property where you didn't belong or something. So this is important to understand. So then when we look at the next 2 main things, we see that in Numbers 5:6, and then we drop down to Numbers 5:12, and we see an interesting thing, because it says, "Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, if any man's wife go aside and commit a trespass against him." So here we have this word trespass being used, but we're talking kind of about, we're going to get into the laws of jealousy, right? And so when we think about trespass and we think about jealousy, what is jealousy? It is the thought that somebody trespassed against you, right? It's the thought that your wife went and did something that she wasn't supposed to do. Okay, so you're jealous. You're jealous of a potential trespass, essentially. And so it's interesting that we can contrast those 2 things. There's the trespass, which also includes knowing your boundaries. And then there's jealousy, which is when you think that someone's trespassing against you, but you don't know. Okay? And so if we put those into context and we look at things spiritually, we see that it's really about crossing boundaries and how you feel about those boundaries being crossed, right? Because we think about a trespass, right? You could trespass accidentally, right? There's sins of ignorance, actually, and the laws on how to make those things right. And then there's things when you've trespassed and you know you're not supposed to go across that boundary and you do anyway. That's different. Some people don't know where the boundaries are, right? And that's like people who are not studying their Torah. See, the problem with them is they may be trespassing and not know it. Now, if they care about themselves and the people that they're trespassing against, they want to know where the boundaries are, right? When you buy a property, like acreage property or something like that, what do people do? They go out and walk the boundaries. They want to know exactly where. They have maps and descriptions, legal descriptions, right? A legal description tells you, okay, you've got 100 feet from this point to that point, and there's a marker there. And all of this is to make sure you know what it is that you're buying. Those are your boundaries. That's what you get. That's what your land is. You're not getting that if you buy it. And then you'd say, hey, I thought that stream was part of my property, or I thought the road was my property. It's not. Okay? Oh, I thought the fence was where my property is. How many property disputes happen because someone buys a piece of property and either a fence is put on before or after, right? And if you already live on a property and your neighbor builds a fence, but he didn't go out and measure it, and so now he just took a foot of your land because he put his fence on your land when he didn't know the boundary. And there's laws that say if he leaves it there for long enough that he can actually go down and record and own that property because he's had it and you didn't say anything for so many years. Okay? So there's all these disputes over where the boundaries are. Okay? Let alone if people are respecting it. What if somebody walks across your property, right? There's laws that affect that as well. If they walk across your property to go to a stream and they do that for so many years and it's open and conspicuous as the law states, and you don't do anything about it, eventually they can actually record a right of way across your property to where, let's say you want to put a pool in, and that's going to close off that area. They can actually stop you from putting a pool on your own property because they've been using the property and you didn't stop them in that time. Some of the laws are kind of wacky and interesting and crazy. But the fact is that, again, that's about someone who's crossing your boundaries and what your reaction to that is. So this is all relative to the Torah. The Torah and the commandments are our boundaries. And then depending, you may yourself be crossing boundaries that you know are boundaries of the Torah and you don't think they matter that much. You may be going out to a restaurant and going, well, you know, I did order the cheese pizza, you know, so, you know, I'm kind of doing my duty. But you realize that there's no way that that wasn't cooked on the same pan that the splattering grease from the pepperoni pizza right before you was. You think they washed, they washed the blade. I asked them to wipe it off. Wipe it off with what? They dipped that rag into a bucket that they've been wiping pepperoni grease into. Guess what that bucket is full of? Pepperoni grease. And then you think because they have a little bleach in there that they're going to wipe your blade and that it's going to be clean all of a sudden? Like, people don't understand, like, that's just not even going to be kosher. You're not going to get a kosher pizza out of a pizza place that's serving pepperoni and every other unclean thing, let alone the hands that are touching it and the defilement and the cross-contamination. And the person who prepped up that dough, who was just sitting there cutting pepperoni and touching it with the greasy pepperoni grease on their gloves, and then goes and grabs your dough, and now you go, oh well, I didn't use that, and I had him clean the blade, and I had him do all that. Trust me, okay? Your food is defiled, is not clean if you're ordering a cheese pizza from a pizza place. There's just 100 ways it's not clean. And so that's the whole point, is that you may just not be that diligent. You may be lazy about your boundary, just like letting the person walk across it. Then when you want to go do something, hey, that's your problem when you realize, oh, I can't go do something now because I haven't respected those boundaries and I haven't paid attention to those boundaries. Whether it's the boundaries that you're defiling and you're crossing, or it's the boundaries you're allowing others to cross in your life. These are all important. And so what we really learn is that the jealousy, I mean, can you imagine if you say you're God's follower or whatever, or servant, or people make all kinds of claims. But what do you think God thinks about that? What do you think God thinks about that when you're going and doing something wicked or something that's not right? Or you're joining yourself to something and doing things that you shouldn't be doing. How do you think that makes God feel if you are his servant? I would imagine he would feel that piece of jealousy, that, oh, he's supposed to be for me, but yet he's going and joining himself to this other wickedness and to these other things that aren't anything to do with me. You know, so we can learn a lot about trespass and jealousy just by thinking about the boundaries and understanding how important boundaries are. That's why the Torah matters. It isn't about whether, oh, is it for salvation or not salvation? Who cares? Since when did that become the most important piece of the conversation? there's boundaries here. And boundaries define everything. They define what's in and what's out. So to think that that doesn't impact your relationship with God, to think that it doesn't impact who's in the kingdom or part of Israel and who's not, I just take it back to what Mashiach said. Who is my mother? Who is my brother? Right? It's essentially saying, where are the boundaries? Who's inside the boundary and who's outside the boundary? He says, those who do the will of my Father. The same, that's his mother and his brother. Right? The people who are inside the boundaries of his family are those who are obeying the commandments and doing the will of God. Okay? So other people are outside. And even if they wanted to come in, if they do, they're a trespasser. Because they don't belong there. So, something to chew on. Till next time, I'm going to say subscribe, hit the like button, share, leave a comment. Love to hear what you think. And the next video is called the Nazarene.